Hello, everyone, and glad to see all of you right at the beginning of another Oxygen XML live webinar series. This time, we're talking about the spring edition. My name is Alim Belu, and I will be your host for today's event titled DITA Project Management, Validation, and Translation in a Docs as Code Environment. As some of you might know by now, Docs as Code is a philosophy according to which you should write documentation using the same tools and workflows that software developers use to write code. But it's not so much about the tools as it is about the workflows and practices involved, such as continuous integration or version control. In a few moments, our presenter for today, Sorin Carbonaro, Senior Software Developer at Syncrosoft, the company that develops the Oxygen suite of products, will look at such a setup using open source tools and standards that include DITA as the plain text format we'll use, storage and version control using Git, project validation in continuous integration pipelines, and translation workflows based on Fluenta. This being our first webinar from the spring series, let me tell you some information that you need to know about today's event. As always, all of our webinars are being recorded. Be rest assured that this one makes no exception. After the webinar comes to an end, the recording will be made available on the event page on our site, oxygenxml.com, along with Sorin's presentation slides and samples. And also, the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel titled Oxygen XML that most of you are accustomed with by now. And if not, I encourage you to take a look at it afterwards and see for yourself the impressive library of tutorials that are available there for you. Another important aspect that we care about is that as we go along, we encourage you to ask us questions by using the questions panel from the GoToWebinar interface, where our colleague Alex Gitiano will assist us by answering to all of your questions in real time. And of course, we will be addressing those questions again at the end in a Q&A session, along with the latest entries for the benefit of everyone joining us today. With all of this being said, let's start this webinar by welcoming Sorin Carbonaro to our virtual stage. Hi, Sorin.
Hello, Alin, and thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the presentation. Alin already mentioned the title of my presentation. Therefore, all I've got to say is let's get down to business. So today we're going to talk about Docs as Code, and I'm going to mention several benefits of adopting such a philosophy in your company or in your team. I'm going to say a few words about DITA. Then I'm going to talk about version control, collaboration, review, using a Git and using our Git client in Oxygen. Fourthly, continuous integration and document validation in such a continuous integration pipeline. And the last topic for today is about translation and how you can use our Fluenta add-on for translating DITA projects. Towards the end of my presentation, I also have a slide about the possible benefits of the solution that I am proposing to you today. So Alin already mentioned what Docs as Code means. I'm going to say it again. It means that technical writers approach writing documentation the same way software developers approach writing code. Now, the question that arises is, okay, but how do developers work? Well, we use plain text for writing our code. We use issue trackers, version control, code review processes. We use automated tests, builds, and delivery. And I'm going to spend some time on some of the points from this slide later in the presentation. Now, what about the benefits of adopting this philosophy? First of all, Docs as Code promotes a culture where technical writers and software developers work closer together. And by working this way, um, they try to provide the best documentation possible. And how it goes, usually the software developer will write the initial draft of the documentation, for example, after implementing a new feature in the product. The second step is where a technical writer will come and refine the initial draft. And afterwards, the developer will take a second look at the documentation to review the changes. And of course, the last two steps can go back and forth for a couple of times, but not too many times. Another benefit is that by it related to the first point is the fact that the software code and the technical documentation can be kept in sync more easily. Third, the same tools can be used by both software developers and technical writers, so you don't need to buy different tools for developers and for writers. Another benefit is that of automated validation of your documentation using continuous integration. And you use, by adopting this philosophy, you get to use well-known and proven workflows that developers already use on a daily basis. And lastly, if you are already using Oxygen XML editor or perhaps the author distribution, then they already provide a suitable environment for writing docs as code. A few words about DITA now. DITA is the plain text markup language that we have chosen for this presentation. It is based on XML. It is an open standard, and it's used for authoring content and for delivering it. It has been designed to facilitate, among others, to facilitate content reuse, translation, and producing multiple deliverables from one single source. A very popular alternative is Markdown, and to be honest, is probably the most popular plain text markup language adopted, used by those who adopt docs as code. But we also support Markdown in Oxygen, so if you want to choose Markdown, there's no problem. I'm with you. We're still friends. You are free to choose either one. Speaking of data, towards the end of my presentation, I have a slide with some resources. And if you are not very familiar to data, I have there a link from another webinar of mine about how to get started with data in Oxygen. Okay, let's move on. So version control. What is version control? It is the process of keeping track and managing changes. And you do this by using version control systems, which also bring the benefits of collaboration, many people working together, and review. And the most popular version control out there is version control system out there is Git. It is free, it is fast, efficient, and flexible. Everybody is using it. Not everybody, but everybody. That's even beyond everybody. It's very popular, and there are several platforms from which you can choose. You can choose to have Git in the cloud, or you can have it on premise, and you can choose between different workflows and different Git clients. But today I'm proposing to you the Git client add-on, which is integrated directly in Oxygen, and it makes the authoring experience more seamless. So let's switch to Oxygen. Let me switch to Oxygen because I want to show you how you can use the Git client with your documentation. So usually the normal, happy, everything, pink unicorns and rainbows scenario goes like this. First of all, you should, before starting working, you should pull the changes that your colleagues have pushed to the remote repository. And here in the toolbar, you have an action for getting those changes. And then you start working. Let me open a topic. And let's say, for example, that I change the title of my topic. Today I'm going to show you quick examples because I want to make some points. There are not going to be very complex scenarios and examples for the sake of being quick and proving some points. Once you saved the changes in your editor, you can see them here in this Git staging side view. By the way, I already have the Git client installed. If you don't have it, you can go to the Tools menu and you can select this Git client action, and you'll be able to install the add-on. Okay, so we have made some changes. Here, the unstaged files area is the area where we see our work in progress. Once we decide we are ready to commit, we move our changes to the staged files area. So this, as I mentioned, this area is showing the changes that are ready to be committed. Some say that before committing, you could also try to pull again the incoming changes. And when you are really ready, then you need to provide a commit message. It's a best practice, and it's very helpful for your team to provide meaningful commit messages, which I'm not going to do today because, again, I want to move quickly through the presentation. So let's perform our first commit. Commit number 1, silly commit message, but I want to be quick. And after our changes are committed, we can see here that we have one outgoing change, and the tooltip shows us some details about the changes. And when we push the changes, if we switch to GitHub, where I have my DITA project, we can see that the changes were brought here to GitHub. Now, let's say that I change something else here in my topic. I changed the short description, but in the meantime, one of my colleagues changes something else. For example, here someone changes the dot to exclamation mark. And when we move back to Oxygen, we see that we have one incoming change. Again, on the tooltip, we see details about that change. Now, if we try to pull the changes, we will get this message telling us that we cannot do that because the changes cannot be merged if we have uncommitted changes in the same file where someone else has committed and has pushed to the remote repository. And here we get 3 options. Some suggestions. We could, for example, discard our changes if the changes are not really important. Maybe we were testing something. We can discard our changes, or we can stash them. This means that we put the changes aside for a while and then we reapply them, or we can choose to commit the changes in our local repository. Speaking of repositories, Git has 2 such kind of repositories. It has a local repository where you can commit even if you don't have internet access, and then there is the remote repository, as we have seen on GitHub, and of course you need internet for pushing the changes, but in your local repository you can commit any problems without having internet connection. I choose to stash the changes, to put them aside. I will go with the default name of the stash. And now you can see that my short description has been reverted. And here I have one stash. Now I can safely pull the changes from the remote repository, and I can list the stashes and apply the stashed changes for earlier. And now I can also delete the changes because I don't need them anymore. And I can proceed with the normal workflow. Commit and push. Now, let's see what happens if when working on the documentation, two people perform changes in the same place. Okay, so someone, let's say I delete the first sentence from here, and I commit again without pushing the changes, and my colleague again in the same paragraph, let's say someone deletes the entire paragraph. Let's commit and switch back to Oxygen. And now we should see the incoming changes. And if we try to pull now, we will get conflicts on this file. This is, yes, my file cannot be rendered in the author mode because we have these conflict markers here, which break the XML file. And this is where some people get nervous when they see conflicts, but conflicts are manageable. And the first step you need to take is to keep calm. Okay, so keep calm and resolve the conflict. Then we need patience and attention. What we need to do is, first of all, to check how the changes are conflicting. And I use this diff, and we can see that in my changes, I have this sentence and the incoming changes. So here in this URL, I can see mine from my changes, and here theirs. And their changes delete the entire paragraph. So now it's the moment where I have to decide which changes I want to keep. Again, we need to pay attention and to be patient. For example, let's say that I want to keep their changes, so I delete my my sentence and I save the changes. And now before committing, I want to check again. Let's say that I have multiple files. I want to check again all the changes in the files that I'm about to commit. And when I double click on that file, I take a second look and I say, I don't know if it's a good idea not to have this sentence. It is very helpful. And what I can do is, for example, to right click here on the change, go to resolve conflict and say restart the merge. And all the uncommitted changes will be reverted. We are taking everything from the beginning. And now I can say I'm sure I want to keep my changes. And a shortcut is to choose this resolve using mine action. And now all conflicts were resolved, and I need to commit to merge the changes. and now I push the changes to the remote repository. So this is how you solve simple conflict, but the same steps apply even for bigger conflicts. You compare the changes and then you take your time to see which changes you need to keep using our diff tool. If you want to try to avoid having too many conflicts, what you can do is to go to Git's preferences, here options, preferences, and we look for Git client, and we have this notify me about new commits in the remote repository. And when I select this option, every time someone pushes changes to the remote repository, I will be notified, and I can pull the changes before I perform commits to avoid merge conflicts. Again, one thing I want to mention, when using the same project, is a good idea to also use the same options, and then you would need to set the Git preferences page to the project level, and this way everyone in your team will use the same options, and this will be helpful a bit later when we're going to talk about the validation options. Okay, so let's apply these changes. And now if someone commits something here on the remote repository and we switch to Oxygen, we see that we get this notification that new commits were detected. And it is recommended to pull them in order to avoid future conflicts. And we can press this button and the changes will be brought in our working copy. The project file has changed because we saved the preferences inside it. I was talking earlier about the validation options, and again, the project options are even more helpful. Saving the preferences to the project level is even more helpful when deciding which validation options you want to keep or to use, because you want the entire team to validate in the same manner, to perform the same validations. And here we have an option to validate each file before committing. So you validate it standing alone, and without any other context. You validate the syntax, but then you also perhaps want to validate your changes in the context of the entire project. And then you would need to use the second option to validate all files from the project's main files folder before pushing. The first option will be applied before committing, and the second one before pushing. By default, when you activate these options, you will still be able to commit anyway or to push anyway, even if you have validation problems. The dialog box that will be shown will have a button to commit anyway or push anyway. If you want to remove even the possibility of committing if you have validation problems, you can use this reject commit when validation problems occur. And the same goes for rejecting the possibility to push changes if you have validation problems. So, and let me show you an example for, let's say that someone breaks the end tag here. Now, if we try to push this, I lost the number of commits. Now we try to commit, and we get this dialog box telling us that validation problems were encountered. And now we have to solve the problem and stage the changes and try to commit again. And now the commit was successful and we can push the changes if we want to. But I don't want to do that right now, because for validating the changes before pushing, we need to do a little bit of work. First of all, we need to activate the main files support for the project. So here on the project root, we select this enable main file support action. And then because we have a DITA project, we add the main DITA map, the top level DITA map, to the main files folder. Then we need to switch to the DITA maps manager. And here we need to configure a validation scenario and associate this scenario to with our DITA project. We extend the DITA map validation and completeness check scenario because I want to perform more changes. So let's say we want to perform all the changes from down here to perform the checks, sorry. So we want to perform all those checks. Okay, now we click save and close. So now we have configured our DITA map validation and completeness check. We have selected all those options from the dialog box, and we have associated our scenario with our DITA project. And now, if we try to push the changes, we get another dialog box telling us that validation problems were encountered in the project resources and we cannot push. So this is a pre-push validation. And our DITA map validation has found that we have a duplicate ID. We have the same ID in introduction.dita and copyright.dita. So let's change the ID for the copyright. And now we can also commit these changes. And if we try to push again, we can see that the push was successful. Okay, and one more thing about Git. When you work on the same project, you want to keep track of your changes, and if you work with some other people, when you work in a team, you also from time to time want to see who committed what changes and when and why and so on. And this is when the show history action and the show blame action are helpful. If you want to see the history of the entire branch, you can use the action from here, from the toolbar. And here you have the entire history for the current branch. But if you want to see the history, let's say for a single file, you can either go to the contextual menu of the editor and use this show history action. And now we see the history only of the introduction.data file, or we can do the same thing from the project view. Here, git show history. And here in the history view, we see details about each commit, who was the author, when the commit was performed, the commit message, and the files that were changed. Now we have only one file because that's how we have chosen to show the history. And for the resources in a specific commit, in a specific revision, we have actions such as compare the current version, the currently selected version with the previous version, or compare this version with the working copy version, or we can, for example, reset the file to the selected commit. We can take the contents from a certain point in time and we can bring them to our working copy. And the other helpful action is show blame. And as the name suggests, it tells you who is to blame for some changes. And the blame action colors the changes with different colors. For example, if we select this block, green block, we can see all the changes that have been performed in a specific revision, more specifically this revision from here, because when we select a revision in the main editor, we also see the revision in the Git history view. And when we choose another revision, again, it's selected here in the history view, and we can see who committed this line and why they committed it, and if it was a long time ago, if my colleague is still around here to ask him a few questions, and so on. So Git history and Git blame are very helpful when working with a team and to keep track of your changes. Okay, so that's about it for Git. Let's move on and talk a bit about continuous integration and document validation. So the first question might be, what does continuous integration mean? Continuous integration, or CI in short, is a best practice in software development, which says that developers should commit or push their changes frequently to the central repository, where on that central repository there are automated builds and automated tests which are run. And one of the main benefits of using continuous integration is early issue detection. Now, speaking on the second subject of this slide, document validation, another best practice is to validate your files, to validate your data maps, in our case, again, frequently, regularly, because you want to make sure that your maps and your topics are valid, that you don't have any broken links, that you don't have any unreferenced reusables, and even that the writers respect the company's style guide. And we have seen earlier the data map completeness check and validation scenario, and you can integrate that action in your continuous integration pipeline, and you can also enhance it with business rules written in schematron. We have seen that the data map validation and completeness check has all kinds of checks, a lot of them, but if you feel the need of even more checks, then you can use business rules with schematron. And now let me switch to my web browser. So my project has been configured to work with Netlify, where I can perform my continuous integration. The project from here from GitHub is public, so you can take a look at it, and you can take a look at how I configured it to work with Netlify. In short, there is this netlify.toml file, which performs a command, and the project is quite simple. So I think you will be able to figure out quite quickly how everything works, because it's a small sample. And here on Netlify, we can see that I have already some deploys, some builds which have been performed in the past when I was working on this project. And if we go and take a look in the console, here we can find the validation results. So we can see here that the data map completeness check action has been used, and we got some validation results. In the past, we got, for example, this error that we have seen earlier, that there was a duplicate ID. And we have one more error here, saying that our content has an empty element, and usually you shouldn't have empty elements in your content, right? And here we can see that the engine is schematron. So I have in my samples, you can find a schematron file with some rules, and one of the rules says that there shouldn't be any empty elements in my content. And I have configured my data map validation options to also include that schematron file along with the checks that I have selected earlier. And if you want to, you will need to provide the data map completeness check settings to the validate and check for completeness script. And in order to do that, you can select the validate and check for completeness action and then export settings. You select all the checks that you want to perform, and then you export these settings, and you provide the resulted file as the value of one of the parameters of the validate and check for completeness script that I run in my continuous integration pipeline. And whenever you perform a change, let's say that I delete the silly content from here. Now, if I commit some changes again and push them to the remote repository, Netlify should pick up the changes and should start a new deploy. And you can see here building right now 6:37 p.m. in our region. And the last topic for today is about translation and how you can use the Fluenta add-on for translating your DITA projects. So Fluenta is an open source tool, and it has been designed to simplify the translation workflow for DITA projects. It works like this. It first parses the entire data map, and it flattens it. It resolves all the references to all the topics and to all the sub maps and subtopics and so on. And it generates, you can generate a unified XLIFF file. XLIFF is an XML based vocabulary used for translations. And then you can send this file to the translators. And once you get the file from the translators, you can import it into your data project using Fluenta, and it will generate the translated version of your project. And the Fluenta data translation add-on in Oxygen allows you to manage this entire Fluenta workflow straight from the Oxygen XML editor. So let me switch again to Oxygen. Again, I have the add-on already installed, but if you need to install it, you can go to Help, Install New Add-ons, and here in the filter, you can write Fluenta, and you will find the add-on and install it. Once you once you have this add-on installed, you will be able to work as I'm going to show you how. First of all, I want to go back to the preferences page, but now for the Fluenta add-on, because I want to change the Fluenta projects folder, the translation memories folder, and I'm going to say a few words about these translation memories, which are very, very helpful, and to change the default target languages. Again, when you work with a specific project, perhaps you want everyone to use the same options for this translation workflow. For example, you would want to generate the same the XLIFF file for the same language. Everyone to generate the file for the same language. So for today's presentation, I'm going to try to translate to my native language, which is Romanian. And now I change the projects folder to be somewhere in my project here. So here I have Fluenta project. I want to keep all these files relative to my project, and Fluenta memories. And now we apply the options. The next step is to create a Fluenta project. Here at the bottom of the contextual menu, we have this sub menu, and we use the create project action. We give a name, gear pump. That's the name of the DITA map. And we create the project. Now the next step is to generate an XLIFF file, which we will send to the translators. I'm generating it here. Let's say I make this folder and I select the language and I generate the XLIFF file. It takes a few seconds to generate the XLIFF file. And now I can open the XLIFF file. This is what I'm going to send to the translators. Now let's start translating. First of all, I want to change. So this is the file that I'm going to translate. I'm going to act as the translator right now. We pretend that we have sent this file to the translator, right? And for the DITA map, I want to translate this title. This is the title, gear pump. And in my native language, so I have the source text. I have to provide the target, which is the translation. In my native language, gear pump is pompă cu roți dințate. Now I save the changes, and let's pretend that the entire XLIFF has been translated. Once we get it from the translators, we go back to this menu and select Import XLIFF. And let's select our XLIFF file. Now it is very important to update the translation memory every time you get a new version of the XLIFF with more content being translated. That's because translation memories help us with providing some possible translations for new content. And I'm going to show you a bit later how this works. We import the XLIFF file. Again, it takes a few seconds. And now we can go to this folder. RO stands for Romanian, and we can load the DITA map. And we can see here that the title has been changed to Pompă cu roți dințate. Now let's say that no, I don't want to switch to another perspective. Here in my introduction file, I write gear pump somewhere else, gear pump. Save. And now I want to send my content again to the translators. Actually, I've done a mistake. So I have opened, you can see here in the file path, I have opened the translated introduction topic. I don't want to do that. Let me close everything. Let me close the translated map. because I want to change here, to make a change here. So gear pump. Okay, now let's regenerate our XLIFF file. Select the language. Again, it's very important to select use the translation memory, because we have already translated gear pump, and Fluenta will be able to provide a possible translation for us. And also you can, and you should select this reuse ICE matches. ICE stands for in context exact, so that you won't translate the same content twice. The same content in the same context. If you have, let's say, the same text in 2 paragraphs, then Fluenta will propose, using the translation memory, will propose a translation for the second paragraph, but the same paragraph, the first paragraph will be already translated, because we have already translated it there in that specific context. And let's see what I'm trying to say here. Again, we are generating the XLIFF file, and we open the file. Okay, let's see, where is gear pump? Here. So this is, where's the file? Gear pump DITA map. And because we have chosen to reuse the ICE matches, this gear pump source is already translated. So we have a target, pompa cu rost dințate. If we look for introduction, let's see, where is introduction? Here, the file is introduction.data. So we have another gear pump here, and thanks to using translation memories, Fluenta has generated this alt trans element for us, which provides a possible translation. We have also a match quality. The match quality is 78 from 100. That's because the initial translation had a dot. If we hadn't had the dot, then the match quality would have been 100. And all the translator has to do is to delete the alt trans element, this source, and add a dot here. And that's pretty much it. And now if we import the XLIFF file, we will see in the generated map that the new content is also translated. But we have already seen how the content is translated. Therefore, I'm going to go to the summary slide, where I'm presenting some benefits, or some possible benefits of the solution that I have proposed to you today. First of all, the solution uses mainly open standards and free technologies, and these standards and technologies can help you with cost reductions. For example, DITA can help you save money thanks to content reuse. You can have a warehouse topic where you have a paragraph or a section of a topic that you can reuse in multiple topics. Fluenta and XLIFF can also help you save money thanks to simple administrative activities, because you only have one XLIFF file instead of hundreds of other files. And thanks to using translation memories, which we have seen that propose possible translations, still related to cost reductions, when writers and developers use the same tools, this can also mean perhaps saving money. The Oxygen's data validation support is very powerful. It already has 20 plus checks, and if those are not enough, then you can augment the support using business rules with Schematron. Another benefit is that of early issue detection. thanks to continuous integration and automated tests, and we have seen how Netlify can help us with our CI. And lastly, Git is awesome. It is fast, it is flexible, very powerful. And if you are not familiar with Git, if you don't know Git, you will find tons and tons of tutorials, free tutorials, paid tutorials. You can choose which one to follow. Okay, one more slide. I have here some helpful resources, links to blog posts, YouTube presentations, one of my previous webinars, and so on. You can find very helpful content. So if you are interested in any of these topics from here, you can take a look. I found them really helpful, and I recommend them to you. So that's it. Thanks for bearing with me until now. And now we are eager to help you with your questions. Okay, guys?
Thank you, Sorin, for your presentation. Now I think Alex will take over the questions and answers section.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Thank you, Sorin, for your thorough introduction into the Docs as Code world. And we did have a couple of questions. I'll go over them. Is it possible to commit locally and then push to remote as a separate operation? So the answer is yes, and that's the default flow that was demonstrated by Sorin. You have one button that commits, you press commit, and afterwards in the toolbar you push, so you can commit multiple times and just push once. But there's also an option to do these together here, so as Sorin demonstrate. You can activate the automatically push for after each commit. Second question, can you cherry pick commits between branches with the Git plugin? So unfortunately, no, not yet. We have it on our to-do list, but the Git client started as, so we intended to have in it the most used operations in Git, the ones that the technical writer performs frequently, like commit, push, and pull. But as it grew and as we received feedback from our users, we added more and more functionality. And the cherry pick, it is on our to-do list, but hasn't yet, so we didn't get the time to implement it yet. But I've added a +1 because we're always happy to bring more functionality that you need in the Git client. Next question. I guess this question relates to the validation of the main files when you push changes to Git. So the question says, would this also include schematrons? Can you include multiple schematrons? So the question is, the answer is yes. You can configure a validation scenario over the map, and you can also add the schematrons there. Another question, can I get a prettier version of the log? I jumped one. Can organization customize the language in the configuration pages and messages in the Oxygen and Git? It is not very user-friendly. Well, first of all, we want to improve. So if you have something specific, then please send us the feedback, and we'll improve those messages ourselves. But you can also change these messages yourself, although it's not in an ideal way. All these messages and labels are present in a configuration file, translation.xml file. So you could create a copy, rewrite these messages, and override the default one, I guess. But I would prefer to let us know, and we can quickly release a new version of the add-on, because that's actually why we chosen to develop this Git client as an add-on, so we can have frequent release cycles. As soon as we notice something, as soon as we implement a feature, we can push it right away instead of waiting for the Oxygen release cycle.
And by the way, we have already changed some of the messages in the current work,
Yes.
in our current sprint, but specific feedback would be best, would be the best.
Mm-hmm. Next question, can I get a prettier version of the log in a more readable HTML format by email? Our technical writers cannot and will not read plain logs. So this is related to the continuous integration pipelines. And the answer is yes, of course. So Sorin just wanted to demonstrate the possibilities, but the script that runs all these validation can also apply an XSLT over the XML result. And afterwards, the resulting HTML can be uploaded to a server or sent by emails, or as we've done it in the past, to upload a report to Sonar Cloud. If you use Sonar Cloud, it's just a way to demonstrate the possibilities.
By the way, I already use an XSLT script to pretty print the XML, so you can use that. You can use that as the starting point for generating HTML if you want to.
Okay. Next question says, great presentation as usual. I write in English and use the Oxygen XML terminology checker for English only right now. Then I translate my docs into French and German with Oxygen XML and Fluenta and XLIFF. This works great, but how do I make new terminology checkers for my new French and German documents? So we didn't present the terminology checker in right now, but you can feel free to Google it. The answer is that you can, because the translated topics will all have an XML lang attribute set to the appropriate language, like XML lang equals FR for French. And in this terminology checker configuration file, you can specify the lang attributes on those. So you match depending on the language. And in the last release of the terminology checker, we've also added an expat context element to help you filter again on which context a rule applies. So that also brings a lot of flexibility and power. But if we refer only to this translation context, that I would say the first option with the lang attribute would be more appropriate. Would the translator edit the XLIFF file directly in text view, or will they use the author view or another app? I'm not sure if the translators edit the XLIFF in Oxygen, although they could. That's how we've worked with them lately. And there's also an author mode for the XLIFF file, and yeah, so I imagine they could either way, but they probably have their own tools to load XLIFF files and to processes to identify matches and so on. So that's an XLIFF file in Oxygen's author mode. Another question, does WebAuthor support the Git plugin? The answer is yes. The WebAuthor also has a Git integration, although it looks and functions a bit differently, considering the fact that the WebAuthor also it's a web application, but it does have an integration. Okay, I got lost here. Is the conversion from XLIFF just for DITA or also for other XML documents? I'm interested in translation of XML schema documentation and names of element and attributes. So I'm not sure what to answer here. So probably come with a follow-up email.
From what I know, XLIFF is not used only for DITA, but
Right.
Fluenta is only for
Yeah.
DITA.
So in theory, if you have the right transformation pipelines, you can generate this XLIFF from XML schema. So you can write this XSLT that processes the XML schema and outputs XLIFF that you afterwards send to translation. But I'm not sure if I know of an existing tool that already does that. I guess you could pass through DITA, for example, from XML schema, you can generate DITA XML, which you pass through Fluenta and get your XLIFF, but afterwards do the somehow the entire process backwards. Another question, can you generate XLIFF files if your map contains markdown files? I'm not entirely sure if Fluenta also handles markdown files, but you can ask a question on the Fluenta project page, and Rodolfo Raya will definitely answer, as he has answered and helped us a lot during this integration. And if you don't ask, I can ask him this and return with the answer. Another question, where are the translated files stored? So after you generate these XLIFFs, if the XLIFF is stored locally, obviously, and afterwards you will have to send them yourself to the translator. When you get the translated version of the XLIFF files, you apply them in either in Oxygen or from Fluenta, and the translated version of your project, of your map, is saved locally. As we do it by default, it will be in a directory with the language code. So again, it's local. But if you want to upload it, then you can upload it afterwards. For example, if you have a Git repository, the translated version can sit in the same repository as your main language files. As we would do it, we would create a different directory for each language. So an FR for the French and another for German and so on. And afterwards, you can use the Git client to commit and to push the changes to the repository. Another question: are you able to demonstrate how Markdown could be used with Git to use the Git client? Well, from Git perspective and from the Git client's perspective, it's no different. So perhaps, Sorin, you can create a Markdown file here in the topics. In the project view, you can create a Markdown file. Just, yeah, here somewhere.
Okay, so new file, and you can use the filter MD for Markdown. Let's say file Markdown, create, and here you can write your content, and you can see the preview on the right side, and then you can simply stage the change and commit and push as we have shown earlier.
Yes, so again, it's text. Markdown is text. DITA is text. Anything that's text can be handled just as well by Git. And actually, some can even mix it up. So in a DITA project, you can also refer Markdown files, perhaps with release notes. Can add reference to the Markdown files in your DITA map, and they will be converted automatically when publishing, when you're publishing. Another question: if you are using multiple projects, your one XLIFF file should reside one level up, so that includes all projects. So if you have multiple projects, like multiple DITA projects, when you generate the XLIFF, you start from a main map, from a root map. So you open that map in Oxygen and you generate the XLIFF files. And when the XLIFF gets back, you apply it on the same map. So basically, you would get one XLIFF file for each root map. So if I didn't quite understand the question, perhaps we can further refine it, send us an email, and we can continue this conversation. Next question: do you have an expected ETA for cherry picking? I'll have to ask the upper management for that, but we'll try to push it and to squeeze it between other features that are of interest for the upper management. I can promise that.
Our Git client, by the way, is open source. So if you have someone in your team or in your company who's a Java developer, they can take a look in our project and they contribute to the project.
Another question: could you please show me how can I translate on author mode? Well, you open the XLIFF file in the author mode, like Sorin presented, and it's presenting right now.
So this is the XLIFF in the author mode, and then you would have to place the cursor somewhere outside the source, press enter, and type target or type a few letters, and this will insert the target element in the back. Earlier I have shown you how to introduce the target element in the text mode, and this will have the same effect. So now if for bushings I have no idea how this is translated in our language. This is yeah, a specific term. Let's say bookshop. I think it's
Might have
bookshop.
been,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow. I had a revelation. And now you can see here in the text page that you have this target element. So we have translated the bushings word to Romanian. So just uh, press enter and write target and write your translation.
Next question. We currently use Git and GitHub in our writing team. We use pull requests to request SMEs feedback. Maybe I missed it, but how are push requests incorporated here in Oxygen Git staging to assign specific SMEs as reviewers? So you didn't miss it. Again,
We missed it. We missed it.
pull requests are on our to-do list, but not yet present in the Git client. So what we were thinking to add in the first push request support release would be to be able to create the pull request directly from Oxygen, to by invoking the GitHub API with the right parameters. But yeah, right now you'll have to rely on the browser to create this pull request and to assign it. Next question, does XLIFF update the XML content for the translated XLIFF content? Not sure if I understand the question, but so yes, so after, I don't think it's something that XLIFF does it itself, but so after the XLIFF comes from translation, you'll have the source and the translated version, and you'll be able to generate the translated version of your files, and the translation memory from Fluenta will also be updated, so you'll benefit from the matches in a future iteration. Next question, does the workflow handle very large documents, very large number of documents, I guess, like thousands of topics? So yes, in theory, doesn't really matter how many topics, but obviously it will take longer, to generate the XLIFF file if there are more documents to process. I think Fluenta got quicker in the last releases with various performance improvements like caching catalogs and so on. But now just should give it a try. And again, it's not an operation that you perform daily, this generation of XLIFF. So next question, the environment you built with Oxygen, Fluenta, and Git is awesome and outperforms many enterprise CCMSs already. Also, this wasn't actually a question, but thank you very much. We try to offer, to help out as much as we can. Of course, CCMSs also offer a lot of functionality and a lot of features. So it's not necessarily no, it's not. It just, you have to put them in the balance, benefits and costs, and take the what you consider best for yourself.
But thank you for your kind words.
Another question, when importing XLIFF, there is an option accept unapproved translation. Can you explain this option?
Sure. So let me open the XLIFF. Oh, it's already open, silly me. Okay, so yes, you have this approved no, yes. This should be changed by the translator or by a reviewer. Perhaps after someone makes the translation, someone else comes and reviews all the changes, and they should set this attribute to yes. And I think you mentioned in your question, yes, when you import the file, you have this accept unapproved translations. Now you need to decide, you want to accept unapproved translations or only the approved one. By default, we select the accept unapproved translations. We are eager to receive feedback if you think this should be otherwise unselected, or yeah. So this is what it means, that someone, perhaps a reviewer, came and reviewed the translations, and they said, yes, this is approved and this is okay.
Mm-hmm. So I see that Rodolfo also answered some of the question here. So he says that you can use a computer assistant translation or CAT tool to translate the XLIFF. And Swordfish, it's such a computer assisted translation tool, so the Swordfish translation editor. And it's fully compatible with Fluenta, and it's also open source. So thank you, Rodolfo, for the clarifications. So when we talked about translating XLIFF files and how you do that. Okay, so next question. When I have important XLIFF of translated data map, you said I can store it into a Git. Is it possible to split translated data map to particular patterns, and probably that's a typo, and as topics as the original? So the translated map, so the entire structure of the translated map, so the structure is similar to the original data map for which Fluenta generated the XLIFF file. In that XLIFF file, there is information being stored as, for example, the name of the original topic from which, and the path relative to the data map. So this Fluenta automatically recreates this structure when you apply this XLIFF file when you import it. Another question following up on the previous one. So there will only be one XLIFF file for each language, or can one XLIFF encompass multiple languages in a single files? So as we provide this feature, there will be only one XLIFF file for each language. So as Fluenta generates these XLIFF files, I know that it will generate one XLIFF file for each language. I'm not sure if the XLIFF standard allows to merge to encompasses multiple languages into the XLIFF file, or if it's a desirable approach. And another question, when you publish a translated content, so thank you, Rodolfo, again. XLIFF is a bilingual format, so I guess it's from translating from one language to another language. Another question, when you publish a translated content, are you using the map language row to publish or the original source map using a language attribute? So when you import the XLIFF file, all the translated topics and maps that are generated out of the XLIFF files automatically gain the XML lang attribute. So this is something that Fluenta does automatically, and the value for that lang attribute it's detected and extracted from the XLIFF file. For publishing content as a guide, is the Git client add-on compatible with content managers like Tridion Docs Publication Manager to convert content to PDF format? So I'm not sure how to answer this. I guess I'll have to do some research afterwards, but I will return with an answer for the person that asked this question.
So send us an email to the support address.
Yes, it helps as well, but you also can see the email address. And okay, so we've reached the last question. So thank you again for bearing with us 20 minutes after the designated finish time. Thank you, Sorin, for your wonderful presentation, and I guess we'll meet again soon, right?
Oh yeah, 3 weeks from now, another webinar.
Aline, do you want to take it over from here?
Yes, thank you very much, Alex and Sorin, for providing us with the answers to our audience's questions. Let me first remind you that the event is being recorded, and you will find it. You will find the recording tomorrow, along with Sorin's presentation slides, on the event page. And if you have any comments or questions regarding the presentation, you can also write to us directly by using the Oxygen feedback commenting platform found at the bottom of this very same page, or just email us at support@oxygenxml.com. Before saying goodbye, let me say a few words about our upcoming webinars. On April 19th, we will have how to enable content indexing and search in Oxygen Feedback 3.0, presented by Aline Bolasham. The latest release of Oxygen Feedback version 3.0 brought some exciting new enhancements for the modern comment management platform, including the implementation of content indexing and search functionality. So this webinar aims to provide details about the various features that were implemented. And also, as Sorin mentioned, on April 26th, we will meet again here for the interactive tutorials in Oxygen webinar. Traditional tutorial implies a set of written instructions that the users must follow, but Oxygen takes this concept one step further with our live tutorials add-on. The tutorial tutorial is embedded within the application itself, thanks to the live tutorials add-on. The samples for each step are opened automatically and hence are available on request, and the mission success is detected automatically. So this will be another exciting webinar. And also for more details and more events, please check our events page on the oxygenxml.com site. And in closing, I want to thank you all for being able to join us today and for staying with us a little bit late. But I hope you had a great time and that you enjoyed our live presentation. And again, a big thank you to our today's presenter, Sorin Carbonaru, and also a big thank you to Alex Gitiano that was behind the scenes and also in front of the mic to make sure that all of your questions were answered. As always, we have some great events ahead of us, and I hope that some of you will be able to join us again in the following weeks. Until next time, stay safe and have a great day or evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.